investigative or a full-blown investigation. And so the Bar Justice Department shut it down. Now, it may have been that this or that allegation could have been made available in other investigations, but we were told that there was that they decided not to proceed, and the U.S. Attorney for Western District of Pennsylvania did not escalate into a full-blown investigation. This week, we are FD 1023 that we looked at a couple of weeks ago. And these are even further afield. They don't relate to corruption allegations. There's one mention of the Bidens in which the confidential human source says that there was a brief, non-relevant mention of Hunter Biden as a member of the board of Burisma and identified him as the son of Joe Biden. But that was, in the telling of the confidential human source himself, brief and non-relevant to what these memos were actually about. So they don't add anything to claims of corruption. And again, nothing overturns my conclusion that all of this was checked out by the U.S. Attorney who Donald Trump had appointed to office, who Attorney General William Barr had asked to form a team to investigate, and they were not able to find anything that would justify moving further, and nothing we saw today contradicts that conclusion and my understanding that there's simply nothing there.
What was it?
Yes.
Were you given a briefing from the FBI along with the reading of the document, or was this just your interpretation of it?
Well, there were representatives of the FBI who were there to answer questions, but there was no affirmative briefing given about these documents. But in the meantime, because I apparently have been questioned by some quarters of the press about my report of the last meeting, I have asked the FBI to come forward and to memorialize everything that they told us about what took place with the Scott Brady team and the U.S. Attorney's investigation from the Western District of Pennsylvania, their assessment of these tips. And remember, an FD 1023 is a tip sheet that's based on unverified, unauthenticated statements that are received by an FBI agent. And I think there have been studies shown that more than 95% of what comes in and is reported in these FD 1023s doesn't lead to any criminal prosecution.
Given that there's been such a disconnect between what Congressman Comer said about these tip sheets and what you have said, is there any value in declassifying this material so that everyone can get a look at it and get the same assessment that you may have gotten?
Well, I've certainly asked the FBI to memorialize at least the declassified portions of what they told us. I mean, we had a very specific explanation of the FBI's process of having assessments, preliminary investigations, and investigations. And they began at the assessment level and found that there was not sufficient evidence to proceed to a preliminary or a full-blown investigation.
Did the FBI explain
come over. Sorry.
what they meant by it's still an ongoing investigation into Hunter Biden? Does it have anything to do with these documents? Today they said the investigation is still ongoing.
So, but I don't know what David Weiss is referring to. So, you know, I mean,
the investigation into Hunter Biden, he says.
Yes. Well, yeah, that there was no explanation of that point in this meeting. So, look, I'm very happy also to talk about where that stands based on the informations that have been filed in court by the U.S. Attorney David Weiss for Delaware. Those relate to two misdemeanor tax charges. One is a failure to file tax, and the second is a failure to pay taxes. The other is a felony firearms charge. This, to me, demonstrates the seriousness of law enforcement under the Department of Justice. This is a Trump-appointed U.S. attorney who was continued over by President Biden. Obviously, there's nothing in those charges that relate to President Biden in any way, and that's what we know. So that's something that is, rooted in fact, and we can look at those charges in court. And I think that, all of us should be able to honor and celebrate the fact that we still have a working system of justice, despite the fact that there's constant criticism and carping and heckling against the Department of Justice as they try to do their work.
What were the two documents today? Can you describe them?
Well, there were two other forms that did not relate to any of the corruption charges that have been made by our colleagues, and that's all I really think I should say. They're just they're not relevant. There was one mention of the Bidens, as I stated, which was the confidential human source saying that there was a brief and non-relevant mention. That's a quote, a brief and non-relevant mention of Hunter Biden, who is a member of the board of Burisma. So, I cannot say for sure. My assumption is that it was the same, but I don't know that for sure.
Congressman, you wrote to the FBI last week and you gave them a Friday deadline. Do you have any indication that they'll get back to you by this Friday to memorialize that meeting that you had a couple weeks ago?
I fully expect that Director Wray would have someone respond to us by Friday about this. I think that's going to be the easiest way to clear up any confusion about what was said. Some people have tried to suggest that the U.S. Attorney for Delaware somehow took over the investigation into those allegations, and that was not the sense that I left with. What I left with was they thoroughly checked out those allegations. They did not find that there were grounds to proceed further with a preliminary investigation or a full-blown investigation, and we were told that several times. Yeah.
If the additional FB 1023s aren't about corruption, then what are they about? Can you say the general category?
I would prefer not to characterize them, but I would prefer not to characterize them at this point. Yeah. I would just like to restore a semblance of reality to our conversation about this. There is a very longstanding tradition in practice that law enforcement does not engage in the disclosure of details about ongoing investigations and prosecutions. I don't understand the logic of that, there appears to be some effort to blur the boundaries between what's legislative and what's criminal. I mean, when we were going through the January 6th committee, we were very careful to say that we were doing our own independent investigation. We were not going to subpoena Attorney General Garland to come over so we could question him about why he was doing this or not doing that. That's not the role of the Congress of the United States. The Department of Justice has to make their own decisions as an executive branch department, and we've got to get back to that basic rule of law concept. It's a very dangerous thing which inclines us towards authoritarianism when you have politicians who are trying to dictate the decision-making of prosecutors.
Does Congress have
Sure, but there's a very deeply held tradition that the Department of Justice does not turn over details about ongoing investigations, the facts of those investigations, their tactics or their strategy or their analysis.
You
Yeah.
called earlier, just a few moments ago, the tax guilty plea serious. Do you think that this is harmful for President Biden, including politically speaking?
Which the
Tax,
the tax.
the guilty tax plea.
Well, I mean, I would actually consider the gun charges more serious. I'm sure my colleagues on the Republican side would disagree with that. Some of them probably think that Hunter Biden never should have even been charged with his gun offenses. Some of them seem to think that people have an unlimited right to access guns without going through a process. But I'm glad that the Department of Justice is enforcing the law, which requires people to answer questions before they purchase guns, and they have to answer them truthfully. So I do consider that serious. Do I think that President Biden is damaged politically because one of his adult children is taking responsibility for tax and gun offenses that were committed during a period of cocaine addiction, which he has freely admitted to? I don't think so. There's not a family in the country that hasn't been touched by drug and alcohol addiction and substance abuse, and people know what that means, and people do very stupid things when they're addicted to drugs or alcohol, and that's just one more reason people shouldn't be using drugs and alcohol. But do I think that the American people, who are fair-minded and open-hearted people, will take that out on Joe Biden? No, I don't. Joe Biden has worked very actively to try to control gun violence, and he's worked very actively to try to address the problem of substance abuse, too, in the country. And obviously some of that is informed by his own personal experience. Yeah.
Some Republicans have said that they want the FD 1023 document to be revealed to the public. Do you think that would be a good idea?
Well, I haven't thought that through, but I will tell you the reason why confidential human source reports and documents as memorialized in an FD 1023 are not routinely made available is because it would put a tremendous chill on our ability to get confidential human sources to participate. It's not, you can redact their name, of course, but there are lots of other details which could conceivably reveal their identity. And it's not just the FBI, but it's every police department in the country and every other law enforcement entity that will tell you they depend on confidential human sources in a lot of kinds of investigations, including organized crime investigations, drug investigations, complicated conspiracies. And so it would be a very risky thing to say that we're just going to release them for political purposes. And so I come back to the idea that law enforcement has got to be allowed to do their job and to protect the safety of the people.
Right, but since there's so much back and forth and so much disagreement about what actually is in that document, do you think it would allow the American people more transparency with the
Actually, there's not any real disagreement about what's in the document. The disagreement was about what the failure of the Western District of Pennsylvania to further pursue the prosecution or investigation means. And that's something that can be cleared up by the FBI and the Department of Justice. And in truth, it could be just cleared up by waiting to see what happens. I mean, we've already seen what Hunter Biden was actually charged with. He was charged with failure to file taxes, failure to pay taxes in another year, and then a firearms charge. Those things are serious, but they've got nothing to do with presidential corruption. And so I'm afraid, my colleagues have been barking up the wrong tree. And, we're on a wild goose chase, and I hope it can end so we can get back to work at more serious things. If they want to look at corruption, let's look at the corruption that's staring us in the face. The day after the Trump administration ended, the president's son-in-law who was working for the administration, filed to create a new corporation, which then collected a cool $2 billion from the Saudi government after he was in charge of Middle East policy for the administration. So, that's Jared Kushner. That's all based on fact. They're not denying that he collected $2 billion. And we know about millions of dollars in other payments that were received by President Trump during the course of the Trump administration from foreign governments to his hotels, to his golf courses, and in other business ventures. That raises a profound problem. We're not talking about people who are related to the president but are private citizens who allegedly did something. We're talking about the president himself and members of the president's family who had positions in government. I think that that is a very serious issue which we need to be addressing, because there are two basic philosophies of government in America today. And one philosophy is the government has got to be an instrument of the common good, and the other is that the government can be an instrument of private self-enrichment for the president, his family, his companies, and his business ventures. That's a very different thing. And so I think that does raise a profound problem. It cuts across political parties, it cuts across different historical periods, and we should be addressing that. I'm not quite sure exactly how they are classified and at what level. So I'll let the chairman address that, or allow the FBI to address it. There were some redactions in there, as in the first one. Yeah.
The first one?
Yes.
And these two?
Yes, there were redactions about, yeah.
You were ready to move on from this topic. Did you get the impression that your Republican counterparts were satisfied by the briefing, or that this kind of introduced new investigative threads for them?
But I'll let you leave it to them. But I think that this provided even fewer tantalizing clues than the last one, which to me ended up in a complete dead end, because what we learned was that the U.S. attorney who was named by William Barr to check it out said that there was no reason to go any further in the investigation. All right. Thanks so much.
I ended it, well, let us know when you get the 28. The U.S. attorney from Delaware's statement was, this is an ongoing investigation. I don't know exactly what that means. We're trying to determine that. But we know the last time that Raskin and I were in there, and we did get a briefing, we didn't get a briefing today. There was no briefing today. And the two documents were so heavily redacted, I have nothing really to say. I'll answer a few questions, but there's nothing to say because they were so redacted.
So the speaker seems to think that the reason the U.S. attorney said there's an ongoing investigation is to hinder them being able to give any documents to the House. Do you share that sentiment?
Well, I'm concerned, but I'll give the U.S. attorney the benefit of the doubt, and hopefully he'll be able to answer that question. I think everyone in America wants to know, what do you mean by this is an ongoing investigation? And I think that's a great question for you all.
Resolution to hold Director Wray in contempt of conduct.
Well, we're waiting to hear back on the 1023 form dated 2018, the two that we looked at today that were so heavily redacted. And look, they're going to have to do better than that. At the top of the 1023, it says unclassified document. I mean, so I'm going in the SCIF to look at an unclassified document that's over 50% redacted. It really doesn't make, what part is redacted? Is it about Joe Biden is that the part that's redacted? I don't know.
Congressman Raskin said that these documents were far afield of what you guys are investigating. Would you agree with that characterization?
That what now?
That the two documents that you do today are far afield from what the focus of your investigation is?
No, the focus of our investigation is Joe Biden and trying to determine what role he played in the millions of dollars that his family took from foreign nationals that was laundered through shell companies into various Biden family accounts. That's what we want to know. What role did he play? And is our president compromised because of the millions and millions of dollars that his family has received from foreign nationals? Yeah.
So now you're talking about the fact that these particular 1023s are redacted. So the next step now to look for the unredacted version of these particular documents, and if you don't get
Well, we're going to talk about that. I'll meet with the committee and we'll talk about it. But right now, they didn't supply the two 1023s that were referenced in the original 1023 form that we looked at 2 weeks ago were dated 2017 and 2018. The two that we were presented today, about the only thing that wasn't redacted was the date, and they were both dated in 2017, one in December and one in March. So, but that's an important point. I want you to remember. I don't know what Raskin came out here and said, but these were dated 2017, and they reference Hunter Biden and Burisma in there. That part, there was one line that wasn't redacted about Hunter Biden and Burisma. That's 3 years before Giuliani ever started running around talking about things. So for the Democrats to go on with this narrative that this is about Giuliani, that is a lie. These were dated 2017 today, two of them. And we think there's one dated 2018, and the FBI couldn't answer that, but they're going to find out and get back with us.
We and others have reported that prosecutors did look at Hunter Biden's overseas business dealings.
I'm sorry, say it one more time.
We and others have reported that prosecutors did look at Hunter Biden's overseas business dealings as part of the Weiss investigation. Why do you think your committee is going to be able to uncover something that prosecutors have not been able to?
Well, I wonder, did the prosecutor find all the shell companies? Did the prosecutor go through the suspicious activity reports where 6 different American banks suggested that the Bidens were involved in a money laundering scheme through various shell companies? Did they know about the FBI Form 1023 that alleged years before we uncovered the shell companies that an oligarch said he bribed both the president and his son, and he did it through various banks that investigators it would take 10 years to find. So I don't know what the U.S. attorney looked at, but we're going to do a very thorough investigation, and you're not going to have to ask questions of me like we're asking of the U.S. attorney in Delaware. You will know what we find because we come out here and present it to you. I have a press conference, and we'll do it. Anytime we find new bank records, we are transparent and present it to the press. What's going on now with Delaware, you all are asking me questions about what he did. I don't know what he did. All I know is the last line said, this is an ongoing investigation.
So, Chairman, what are you going to do to try to get those answers specifically?
Well, we've got people coming. We've got bank records coming in. We're going to be reviewing those. Our investigation continues. Remember, our investigation is of Joe Biden. It always has been. In December, when we had the press conference, or maybe it was the end of November, I said, this is an investigation of Joe Biden. This is still an investigation of Joe Biden. The president's son, obviously, is a person of interest in the investigation. We believe that we've already brought out overwhelming evidence that would suggest of money laundering, wire fraud, racketeering, being an unregistered foreign agent, very serious crimes that, for whatever reason, weren't dealt with in the plea agreement today. But regardless, we're going to continue to focus on Joe Biden. We're going to continue to follow the money. Hopefully, we'll be having more people in for depositions, and we'll have a committee hearing very soon. I'll ask one more question, then I'll let you. Well, so let's take what we've presented so far. The money, the $1 million from Romania and millions of dollars from China that went to the Biden family through these shell companies that went to 9 different Biden family members. Does anyone dispute that 9 different Biden family members got money funneled through shell companies from foreign nationals? Does anybody want to debate that right now? Everybody knows that, right? Some of you, I don't know that you reported that. But 9 Biden family members have gotten money from foreign nationals in China and Romania that was funneled through shell companies. My question right now, with just that part of the investigation, what did they do to receive that money? Because I just don't believe that the president's grandchildren and the president's son were savvy enough to do some kind of deal that would give them the benevolence from these foreign nationals. I believe that that the president, then vice president, was involved. We have other countries that we're just now getting bank records in, from Russia, from Ukraine. We know the president's brother was heavily involved in some shady activity in the Middle East. We're going to continue to... I guess to the press corps, I mean, I feel like I'm going to be held to a tougher standard than Adam Schiff by you all. But I want to be.
Prosecutors, you would have to present that evidence to prosecutors, right? If you're digging for this evidence, it would have to be something in writing. Otherwise, it's just.
This is my last thing. I appreciate the question. But do you not have a little curiosity as to what the Biden family did to receive all this money? Are you not the least bit curious? Because it really doesn't make sense. I've been in politics a long time. I'm in pretty high level now in Congress. My kids don't get wires from foreign nationals or anything like. I don't have shell companies or anything like that. It's not normal behavior. And this is something that I think, and look, MSNBC is going to say, well, he referenced polls or whatever. The reference to the polls was that a majority of Americans are keeping up with this investigation and want to know whether or not the president was compromised. A majority of Americans are opposed and detest public corruption, and they expect the House Oversight Committee to lead a credible investigation. And unlike Adam Schiff, I can't just walk up and say, yes, we have very damaging evidence of the president's colluding with Russia. I have to show the evidence. But we have. We've showed wire transfers from Romania and China through shell companies. When you create shell companies for the purpose of laundering money, that's called racketeering. So we're going to continue to be transparent. What happened today really has no impact on our investigation. This time in the skiff with the FBI was a complete waste of my time because so much of the documents were redacted and they didn't have the right dates that matched the footnotes on the original document. So we're going to expect the FBI to come back with the correct dates and the non-redacted version. So thank you all. We'll keep you posted.
Can you tell whether the informant was?
Good afternoon. Our committee today received testimony from John Durham concerning his report on misconduct at the FBI and the Crossfire Hurricane investigation. We did so as a committee on a bipartisan basis. There was a great camaraderie among our members trying to find answers to if there is misconduct, what are the solutions, what are the reforms. It was interesting to hear from Mr. Durham that he has concerns that there are reforms that need to go into place and that there are still issues that need to be addressed. He was very forthcoming and sharing with us, and I think that we were able to get some information that would be very helpful for us in the work that we have to do on both FISA renewal, FISA reforms, and also reform issues with the FBI. And I appreciate my ranking member, Jim Himes. We've approached this together on the issue of, what are the next steps, what do we need to do? And I think Mr. Durham has been a great partner today for that. Ms. Himes.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. And I concur with everything that the Chairman said. We had a good, very detailed, fairly lengthy examination of all of the aspects of Special Counsel Durham's report. There was good comity in the room, good discussion. We helped each other out. The committee really was focused on, particularly on something so sensitive as an investigation that pertains to political candidates. How can we make sure that the behavior of the investigative authorities, in this case the FBI, is beyond reproach? We have had, both in the Clinton investigation, the emails, and of course the Crossfire Hurricane investigations, and very recent past, very, very sensitive investigations. Who knows where we'll go in the future, but we know that we have to learn from the mistakes made in these investigations to make sure that Americans can have confidence in both the prosecutorial power of the federal government and in their elections.
Could you go into specifics about what y'all talked about in there? What did Durham talk to y'all about? What questions did you ask him?
Well, our sessions are closed, and so we're not permitted to be able to tell specific questions and specific answers that occurred. We can certainly tell you our impressions, and I will tell you that both the members of the committee and Mr. Durham really embraced the substantive details within his report. I mean, he's been very thorough in his investigation and in the information that is there. We discussed, obviously, our concerns and his concerns about misconduct, but the real focus of our committee is what's next. We don't want this to happen again, both to the American public, to a president, to a candidate. and how do we put steps in place we can at least try to head this off in the pass?
The questions pertained a lot, as you might imagine, to some of the differences between the special counsel's report and the IG Horowitz's report, because there are some distinctions there. We were very interested in what the reason for those distinctions were. We really probed the boundaries of what special counsel Durham was able to do. There were certain people who didn't want to be interviewed, and so we really tried to get at the boundaries. But honestly, if you read either the IG report, and I hope you do, and special counsel Durham's report, and I hope you do, you'll discover that the conflict is not so much in the black letter text of those reports, it's in the expectations that were built around those reports. So if you believed that the behavior of the FBI was perfect in Crossfire Hurricane, you were sorely disappointed. If you believed the special counsel Durham was going to uncover a massive deep state conspiracy, you were disappointed. The report itself is actually quite useful for our purposes of oversight.
What questions?
The report itself didn't lay out these significant recommendations other than maybe starting a new rule to handle locally sensitive investigations. Can you speak a little bit about what the special counsel said?
Sure. So the report itself, Mr. Durham specifically states that even though he could have, he did not lay out recommendations. In our inquiries with him to ask him to come testify before a committee, he agreed that he would discuss with us his lessons learned, his issues that he thinks need to be addressed, in addition to take questions from us as to what proposals we think might be able to address it and to give his background on those. Yes.
Thank you, Chairman Turner. Why was the hearing closed? Like, what elements were classified? And second, do you think the Durham report and all these investigations, do you think there needs to be classification reform in the U.S. intelligence?
So classification reform is a separate question, and we are dealing with that in the committee. That is something that just as you can look at all the issues that we've had of mishandling of classified documents, that our committee is taking up, and it does need to be done.
Chairman, as far as the FISA issue is concerned, after listening to Mr. Durham, where is the committee right now as far as re-upping FISA at this point? And what you're hearing often about accountability for the FBI, and the FBI says, yeah, sure, we've already fixed everything, and then all of a sudden we're kind of back to a groundhog day. Where are you right now on that?
Right. I don't think anybody on our committee is completely satisfied with the reforms that the FBI has undertaken. There's certainly a great start. They are responding to some of the issues and problems that are identified in the Durham report and in some of the issues and angst that members of Congress themselves have. But I think our goal in reforms to FISA will probably go beyond that and maybe even codify some of the ones that have been proposed.
Yeah, I think I said this earlier. I think the committee, and I think this is pretty close to unanimous on the committee, is because we appreciate the absolutely essential quality of FISA 702 to keeping us safe from fentanyl, from terrorism, from Iranian plots. I could go on. It must be reauthorized. I also think it is unanimous that it must be reauthorized with reforms. And at the core of those reforms really is, in my opinion, U.S. person queries. And if you think about that, as the chairman said, there have been a lot of reforms already made. So the minimalist position would be, let's just do that. Of course, the maximalist position is probably, don't let the FBI do U.S. person queries or make them subject to a judicial warrant. Where we fall at the end of the day between those two extremes, if you will, I think that's still to be determined.
Last couple questions. Yes.
Do you worry with tomorrow's public hearing and more kind of politicized committee that what you accomplished today could be jeopardized?
Well, I am glad that we went first, because I think that having Mr. Durham in this environment allowed him to be very forthcoming and very sharing of his thoughts and ideas. Certainly that tomorrow has a different purpose, but I do think that he was very comfortable at this point with the commitment that our members had on a bipartisan and professional basis to deal with his work to share with us.
Yeah, the world is different when the cameras are running. Behind closed doors, when the cameras weren't running, I will tell you that on both sides there was an attempt to get at the truth, rather than what I fear you might see tomorrow, which is an attempt to maybe elide or angle the truth a little bit in the service of one's political agenda. That didn't happen in our meeting, and I think that was useful for this committee.
On that
We had last question. I think we're over here.
on the shift censure resolution doing this week?
We're not going to comment on that. This is about the Durham investigation. All right, Les, go. You already had a question.
Just Taking the FISA piece aside, I'm kind of curious what this left you thinking in terms of like other reforms of the FBI.
It was very clear that Mr. Durham believes that there was misconduct, and as you've all, in reading his report, he lays out what those instances of misconduct are. He gave us the impression that some of the misconduct is individualized, like there were bad people doing bad things. But then some of it is systemic, and some of it is where we need changes so that there's higher reviews, there's higher requirements for this to ever happen again. And he did share those with us, and I do think that that gives us an opportunity.
Just a quick follow-up on that question. What is your sense of, there's a lot of talk of politicization of the FBI with regard to some of what was discussed at your source. Did you get a sense of whether you still think there's politicization there? Or
Can I take a shot at that? So let's be very clear to the specifics of your question. The IG Horowitz did not find politicization, and the Special Counsel Durham did not find it either. He found confirmation bias, which is bad, but that's just, we're moving in a direction and we're going to keep moving, maybe without being reflective enough. That's different than saying it was politicized. But the larger point, before the chairman gives his opinion on that, the larger point I would make is that I grew up in a generation where you sort of revered the FBI. J. Edgar Hoover, for whatever you may imagine of J. Edgar Hoover. It's been very interesting in this job because I have found, and I think we have found collectively, that culturally and procedurally, the FBI has a lot of work to do. And I would contrast them to CIA and to NSA and the other agencies that we deal with. It's very sensitive right now because we have to reauthorize 702. But whether you're looking at some of the findings of the Durham report, or the recently declassified FISA opinions, which found deficiencies in the FBI's handling of U.S. persons query, or going back to, the director of the FBI in October before a national election announcing publicly an investigation of one of the two candidates. There are all kinds of things where we need to, I think, redouble our efforts in, if it's not quite depoliticizing, at least making sure that the FBI acts in such a manner that Americans can't point to their activities and say that's clearly political. And we have a long way to go on that.
This is the last answer to what is the last questions. The issue here is not just politicization. The issue here is these were presidential political campaigns. And so that's what it has such a higher degree of standard of concern, because it can affect political and electoral outcomes. And that's why our conversations were so important today. Thank you all very much.
Congressman Himes, I'm Brooke Seaman.
Just say hi, okay. Nice to meet you.
All right, that's a wrap.
A Russian man claiming to hold top-level secrets about Russian advanced bombers has just turned up at the U.S. southern border, seeking asylum. The man claims to have been an engineer at a production facility over in the city of Kazan, and he says that he possesses top-secret information about the White Swan Tu-160, which is the most advanced bomber in the Russian arsenal. U.S. border officials, they interviewed the man, and they determined that his story was in fact credible and eventually passed him off to the FBI, who are still in the process of interrogating him right now. However, analysts have pointed out that the fact that the story was even leaked to the public is an indication that perhaps the American government is encouraging other Russians who also hold top-level secrets to also escape to America. And if you thought that was interesting, well then you should click on that button below this video and check out Epic TV, one of the best no-censorship video platforms on the internet. On there you will find awesome programs like American Thought Leaders.
We've now been, for 2 years, trying to obtain the unredacted emails. We're down to the last 50 pages. So that's where all the incriminating evidence is.
Crossroads,
One of the big things happening right now is what's taking place with Russia and China.
Counterpunch,
You will see information you've never seen anywhere else.
Facts Matter. I'm your host, Roman from the Epoch Times. Stay informed, and most importantly, stay free. As well as a plethora of great documentaries, wholesome movies that you can enjoy with your whole family,
If I reach 1 hour, I accomplish something.
cooking programs, and my absolute favorite, programs about traditional art and traditional music, which can honestly uplift your mood and fill you with hope for the future. And the best thing about Epoch TV, at least in my opinion, is that there's no corporate backing and there's no allegiance to some anti-American agenda.
How dare you come to this peaceful community and try to scam these people?
What the hell are you talking about?
But rather, it's just good, honest, wholesome content that's based in truth and tradition.
I saw it. It was incredible.
Something that you can actually sit down with your whole family and enjoy, knowing that some ideology is not about to be pushed upon you.
And who's fighting it? We're fighting it here at Epoch Times, and we need to keep bringing you the news.
And so again, if you'd like to check out Epoch TV, just click on that button below this video. You and your family